Welcome to the World of Rare Disease, a show that focuses on awareness and education about rare and complex disorders. My name is Lisa Deck, and I'm a rare disease patient, a Rare New England board member, and your host for today's show. We have multiple guests today here to talk about I Stay Home for Rare. Levi Gershkowitz, founder and CEO of Living in the Light, is a compassionate writer, photographer, and director with a love for people and the stories they carry. Jeff Reinhardt, Living in the Light's Director of Advocacy and lead editor, has been retelling fascinating stories for most of his adult life. Through an array of mediums, he seeks to illuminate populations often marginalized in our society. With their team at Living in the Light, Jeff and Levi launched the I Stay Home for Rare financial campaign in April 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm thrilled to have both of you here today. Welcome, Jeff and Levi.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. So as background, I would love for you to first tell us a little bit about Living in the Light, the company that was kind of where you started with the idea of the fund, but let's talk about Living in the Light.
Yeah, so Living in the Light is a sort of company that fills what to some might feel like a small niche, but to us encompasses quite the diverse world, which is rare disease storytelling. We work with clients in industry and biopharma, research, medicine, as well as patient advocacy to tell patient stories, people living with rare genetic illnesses and chronic illnesses. Our work has appeared all over the US and the world, and sort of revolves around photography and writing, as well as filmmaking. So that's kind of our three main areas of our artistic prowess.
Excellent. And so can you talk a little bit about how that company and where your idea of COVID-19 came from, COVID-19, the support fund came from, and how it developed?
Sure, I can talk a little bit about that. We can all do this exercise right now as you're watching this, like think back for a moment to like before COVID-19 was a thing and was in the headlines and was in our bodies or the bodies of the people that we love. Now I can look back and say it was an easier time, but if you were to then ask us, come last December or November or even last January, we were all living what we were living and our challenges too. So as a company at that time, we were very much in the throes of the beginning of a new year. We had a lot of conferences coming up. We had a lot of deadlines. We had a lot of projects, a lot of flights to catch, a lot of interviews to do, photo shoots, editing. And it's not that it all came to a halt at once, but it was like you could hear the brakes of the train, a few weeks ahead. And I just kind of realized, I was like, wait a second, there was a particular conference that had been planned for several years. And when that got canceled, it was kind of this decisive moment of if that's not happening, then that, and I kind of realized. And as the lead of the company, it's often my job in stormy waters to grab the helm and just be like, we're going this way, Anyone in the leadership role can, either admit or not admit to that, but there's a time when you have no idea where things are going, but you have to go somewhere. And I started to feel a lot of fear, right? And that wasn't just my fear. I was actually feeling the collective fear of oh no, what is this? And yet I'm someone who, just the premise of Living in the Light is looking for a simple truth or light in a very complex, dark time or experience. And I don't like to use the term silver lining because it's actually so much more complex than that. But what is the growth potential for someone living with a rare disease? And so I thought, wow, we are about as a society to feel a whole lot more vulnerable. Our immune systems are letting us down globally. How is that very different from someone living with a rare disease that they didn't elect to have and didn't choose to pass on to their child, maybe didn't even know it was part of their genetic makeup until they had children? So all of a sudden I was like, well, this is kind of new. It's almost balances things out. And members of the rare disease community are going to be the people that I look to, people that I know that have children with primary immune deficiency disorders. I'm like, these are the folks who are dealing with this level of public health risk every day. And so those are the folks that I'm going to go to as a resource to say, hey, how do I handle myself or my family in this pandemic? And so when we wanted to create I Stay Home for Rare, it wasn't just as a fundraiser, which it is and has been very much, it's a big part of it. It was also as a resource network to start to create the type of resources for people specifically in the rare disease community for where they can go for help. How does COVID-19 actually pertain directly to their illnesses, but also to presence? What specific knowledge and experience do people living with chronic illness or with rare disease or as caregivers, what can they offer to society as a whole right now? Because they are all of a sudden the specialists on how to handle a situation like this. So I really wanted to create a campaign that elevated that. Have we succeeded in that? Partially. I think that's actually still a much larger piece that I'd like to bolster. But the other aspect was, you know, in seeing a lot of communal giving campaigns and people kind of putting in their own love. And we wanted to get funds to folks to recognize that at the time of the first stimulus checks, and maybe Jeff can speak about this, but like we started to recognize who wasn't going to receive these stimulus checks.
Yeah. Yeah. And as much as I think COVID leveled the playing field in terms of our immune systems and, you know, us now in the situation that I think many rare disease families understand, which is like waiting for pharma to do something, you know, waiting for clinical trials and waiting for FDA approval for a vaccine or, you know, I think we can all identify that now, was that there is a disproportionate impact on certain members of the rare disease community. And so, you know, we created this fund, the I Stay Home for Rare COVID-19 Support Fund, as a means to address some of these, what I would argue was mainly pre-existing inequalities that led many people when COVID started into a very perilous financial and health situation. So for example, we, you know, families who don't have US citizenship, who are undocumented, they don't qualify for stimulus checks. So we knew they weren't getting money. You know, people who were incarcerated. I mean, there are many populations of people in the US who, for various reasons, weren't going to see stimulus funds at this time that so many people were. And the ability for people to share, and those who have more wealth or considerably more or just a little bit more wealth to share in whatever way they can to help their, either whether they're part of the rare disease community already or if this is a new idea to them. So we're both, yeah, it's like two things at once. We wanted to raise awareness about the wisdom that's sort of inherent in the rare disease community around like staying home, quarantining, good practice, and we provided a resource page with a number of materials created by that community, and raise funds for people that, despite, yeah, the playing field being somewhat level, still experience harsher financial realities due to being part of a marginalized identity already pre-existing in the United States.
Right. Great. So it kind of had a two-fold plan in this. What has been the response in the community, and what are some of the results you guys have seen from this program?
Absolutely. Well, there was, the need was and is high, if not higher now than it was then, because, right, we're talking about April. So, you know, we said, hey, we're going to run this campaign. I said, we're going to run this campaign strong for 3 months, and maybe we'll call it at 6 months. We're nowhere near the end, right? The need is greater. In fact, many of our recipients, well, I'll save that, but to say what has been the response is that we were able to quickly make connections with 15 patient advocacy organizations here in the US and kind of form a small coalition, had a handful of Zoom calls with the leaders of all of those organizations saying, what are the needs of your communities right now? And of course, we know that there are high financial needs, but where does that land? It's like, okay, well, people need money for rent. People need money for food, for utilities, for transportation, or to fix their cars or get their cars insured because they just moved and they have to go to the registry to get their child to see their physician, because as great as telehealth is, it doesn't work for a lot of needs and conditions. People were needing funds for clothing, for basic necessities. And we knew right away that Black, Indigenous, and people of color already as being victimized really by systemic racism and systems of oppression in this country have set up a life and a lifestyle that already creates disadvantage. And it felt so important to name that clearly, and to create an opening specifically for people with those identities to hear or to know that there was something for them here, and that if we couldn't fulfill the grants, if we hadn't raised enough, that we would do our best to provide resources of where else they could go. So immediately we started fundraising, and I'd say it got off to a very strong start. To date, we have raised 93% of our initial goal of $100,000, which is incredible, and we celebrate the gratitude of every one of our, I think over 208, I think we're at, individual donors that have made that possible, as well as implore those donors and others to continue to give, because this is like not going away. And we're very transparent about how and where those funds are being used, making sure that as much of those funds as possible is going directly to folks. And to date, it all has. We're still at a point where all the funds that have come in have gone out to families. And I have them right here. We made these, I'll just hold it up. It's like you probably see a Visa Bucks card or something like in the checkout line at the grocery store. So that's what folks receive in the mail, with funds ranging from $500 to $2,500, which is an amount specified actually by them in their application of what their financial need was, and itemizing how those funds would be used. One of the main reasons we decided to do it on these cards, Jeff mentioned that a lot of these funds were going to families who are undocumented, and we just wanted to make sure that we weren't creating a tax liability for anybody, that this was essentially cash. There's a great amount of trust involved in that, and we had some questions come up around that of how are you sure that people are using the money in the ways that they say they will and need. And I would say that we put together a terrific cohort, a funding committee comprised all of women advocates, many of whom are patients themselves within the rare disease space, or largely involved in rare disease. And it was truly their role as a committee to decide who would receive what, when, and how. And so we entrusted that, and led by the incredible Taylor Kane of Remember the Girls. And you can look on the istayhomeforrare.org website to see the incredible bios of the rest of the women that led that initiative. So really this became a community effort. And so the response has been strong. And we also got to see several other campaigns very much similar to I Stay Home for Rare in the months following our launch start as well. And so though there were times when we thought, well, let's all do this together, we know that we live in a world and a society that sometimes has difficulty truly collaborating. So that's fine too, because part of the response was actually seeing other campaigns start with a very similar motivation and degree of success. So that's been incredible.
Excellent. Taylor Kane actually spoke at the Rare New England Conference recently. So again, the community is small. So let's talk about the future for I Stay Home at Rare. We had mentioned this on a prior call, and where are you going with this? And what are your current thoughts right now?
I mean, it's funny, you're asking me on a day where so much feels in the balance right now in terms of access to healthcare in our country. The Supreme Court is currently reviewing the ACA and deeming it either unconstitutional or not, which could potentially, strip 20 million people of healthcare. That would almost certainly affect the rare disease community, pre-existing conditions and whatnot. And so, in this moment, my mind really goes to, there is a potential COVID and the rest of the world for just an incredible disparity of wealth. People who have disabilities, chronic illness, or rare disease are on the hook for a major amount of money that for many people is unsustainable. Now, we've learned from doing this fundraiser that, like, when there's a need, people in this community do respond in accordance to that need, which is very inspiring. And so I think we are considering our, the fundraiser is still very much open. We still have applications. There are still people who are waiting for money if we were to get more money. So I'd encourage you or friends and family of yours, if you're interested in donating, to go to istayhomeforrare.org and donate, because we still have existing applications. We actually in August had to temporarily halt the receiving applications because we were just getting to this ratio that we were no longer able to hold. However, depending on how the next few months go, I think we are open to moving forward with continuing to distribute these grants, continuing to raise more money and put it back in the limelight, especially if the need becomes, it already is real. The need is quite real, but if our need becomes that large, it's also important just to mention that as a company, we're balancing this with our day-to-day. So, we've gotten busier this fall and focused on some of our creative projects, not to pit them against each other in any sense, but our team is small and we sort of do the best we can with all of this. We really learned a lot quickly. I mean, I don't have a background in nonprofits so much, and neither does Levi. I mean, we hit the ground running with this campaign, and I'm sure we made some mistakes. I mean, we're still learning a lot. And so we're also really open to people coming in who have inspiration and advice, who have ideas for where this campaign can go at this point. Because I think we've been at sort of a pause and waiting to see if there's more interest in people giving to this campaign. And it has still come in. We've still managed to raise, almost $10,000 in the last, 6 weeks. Yeah. So there is still momentum. It is a good question. I mean, I'm glad that you're having us on this program, because it challenges us to answer this question is a challenge of, like, actually it is in front of us still. And even though all this other stuff is going on at the company here, Living in the Light, I Stay Home for Rare is really important. Yeah. And so, I think it's a very valid question, and I wish I had maybe a more succinct answer, but at this point it's yes, we'd still love to reach that $100,000 goal. It's an arbitrary amount of money, but it will help more people. So that, and at least in the interim, in the very short term, is certainly our goal.
And I would say, and this is where you see, like, we are very much a team. So Jeff is taking in this direction, and I'm more on the side of looking for how can we gain foundational support or institutional support. So now that we're at 93% of our goal, once we reach that, I feel like that's substantial enough to start to look towards some foundations, or maybe even some partners in the industry, to say, here's everything we've done, laying the groundwork with this first initial, it's kind of like the first chapter of I Stay Home for Rare. We raised $100,000 and distributed it to over 100 families. Now, here's what we can do with 500,000. Here's what we could do. And as Jeff says, the goal itself is arbitrary, but the motion, the momentum, the action is not. And so if we can gain, be it foundational or institutional support or both, then we can actually look to really start to multiply this and keep it going. But then the other very real answer to this of what's the future for it is now part of the fabric of Living the Light. It is part of our company, and it's part of our day-to-day. So now, when we started the campaign, the first $10,800 we put in from Living in the Light's funds. So we have taken it upon ourselves to put between 5 and 10% of our earnings every year to fulfilling these grants. So even if no one gives another dollar to this campaign, which I hope at least we'll gain the next $7,000 to reach our goal, and implore you all who are watching to even give $5 to $20 if you can, whatever the amount is. It's like, it's all about momentum, and to share it is that we will continue, based on our growing work and the growth of our organization, to give to this, so we can continue to fulfill these applications and the need. And then the other thing is that we've been doing in fundraising is this person-to-person fundraising model. So we have teams. So, Lisa, you as an example, you could say, I'm going to pledge, not even of yourself, but my pledge is to raise $1,000 for this campaign. You can set up a fundraising page through our fundrise.org page. We'll share the link, and you can share it with a number of people through an email and say, hey, I love what this organization is doing. I know these people personally. I can vouch for the ethics and the application of these funds. Help me to raise this money for them, so we can do it together. And that's actually where over 25% has come through people who gave a little bit, but said, you know what, I want to get behind this. And I have to give a shout out to a number of the people, especially Avery Roberts of Recent and Tejas and some of these folks who have taken upon themselves to raise thousands of dollars for this campaign because they believe in it. And they, as patients living with rare diseases, know how much this is helping families. So it's really incredible. And at this point, though we still, we kind of gave birth to this idea, it's very much its own thing. It's out there. So the more that continues to come in, the more families will be able to help. And fortunately, as the months have gone on, the pathways have been established where it's a lot easier for us now to distribute these funds. As Jeff said, we learned a lot, but because we've learned a lot, we can now operate and do that a lot smoother. And I also just have to thank Rachel Alvarez and the team at Cure CMD, who operate as our fiscal partner in this, utilizing their 501c3 to make sure that all donations are tax deductible. And so that through Rachel's guidance, as well as the leaders of the other 14 patient advocacy organizations, though neither Jeff or I have led a nonprofit in the past, we are calling upon the guidance of 15 terrific leaders out there doing patient advocacy work. So we're not alone in that, and we're always open to collaborative ideas.
Excellent. So you are busy men doing lots of things and a lot of good things. So we really thank you for sharing that. I Stay Home for Rare is a wonderful campaign. I think, not only are you financially helping people, but you're shining a light on them and what it means to be a rare disease patient during this time of COVID-19 and living in the light, of course. There's so much beautiful work you've created. And I know I encourage everybody to check it out because I think from each website, you can see the other, and there's lots of good things. So thank you guys for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Lisa. And yeah, continue to spread the word. We do appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to do so. Before closing, we would like to take a moment to talk about the Rare New England in Motion segment. Rare New England in Motion is the perfect way to expand upon our mission of engaging with our community. Viewers are welcome to tune in live to view shows and take part in an interactive discussion with various shows on our T-Word Rare New England Facebook Live. Guests will be there to answer questions and members of Rare New England as well. It's a fantastic opportunity for viewers to get to know our guests and staff and have all your questions answered. All of our World of Rare Disease shows can be found on the Rare New England YouTube page and our social media accounts. You can subscribe and follow Rare New England for the latest show news. You have a question for us? Please send us an email to info@rarenewengland.org, and we will be sure to include it in our show. Thank you again, Levi and Jeff, for being here. I appreciate you coming from Western Mass on our video to talk to all of our viewers.
Thank you.
From all of us here at Rare New England and all the patients and families who keep rare disease in motion, thank you for watching. And remember, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, and then think zebras. Thank you.